Bichara Supply Chain, highlighting and showcasing solutions for the most complex challenges facing the industry in 21st century by our team of subject matter experts and mentors. Broadcasting every week, all year round, we will present the most up-to-date series of podcasts and webinars.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bichara Supply Chain. This is not Handy House. I'm speaking now with Helen Mackenzie. She is a principal advisor at the Procurious. So Procurious is the world's first online business community dedicated to procurement and supply chain professional. So thanks for coming and welcome to Bichara Supply Chain, Helen.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Okay, so today's topic is women leadership in the supply chain. But before we get in, can you please brief a bit about yourself, your professional background, and tell me about the Procurious?
Okay, so a bit about me. I was somebody who was good at numbers, so I became an accountant when I finished university and worked in the public sector, so always thought I'd be a public servant. Worked in accountancy and then went into policy and really liked the idea of getting in and about the core business and making an impact. But doing policy and sitting in the centre of the organisation can be a bit frustrating because you're writing all the words, but you're not actually getting to take any action. So when I had the opportunity and I got promotion, I went back to the financial world and got a leadership position back in finance. And luckily for me, during that period, I was given the brief for procurement and fell in love with the subject, fell in love with the power that procurement has got to have such an impact on the business and in public service on our communities and the world, and never looked back. So I finished up working in government after a number of roles, including doing things at national level in Scotland about 18 months ago. And I'd been a member of Procurious since it started and got the opportunity to go and work over there with the team. And that's where I am now. So Procurious itself is, as you said, was the world's first online business community. And 6 years ago when it started, it was a place where people like me who love procurement could go and hang out, could ask each other for advice, support, questions, share ideas. And since that time, 6 years ago, we've grown 1,000 members. We passed that milestone about a month ago. And we've blossomed into an organisation that not only has the platform where people in procurement and supply chain can come and connect, join for free, meet up with each other and share ideas, but also we produce blog posts. We produce 5 a week, plus webinars, plus podcasts like this one, really to what we call crowdsource confidence for our community and for people out there. So that's Procurious, 6 years old and going from strength to strength because of our members and because of the people that contribute.
Interesting. All right, so I wanted to start this discussion by exploring the challenge that we may have in the recent situation about the leadership. So my first question to you is, what are the challenges of leader in the new supply chain world, specifically when we speak about the COVID-19 health?
Okay, well, one of the things I do at Procurious is I facilitate conversations between senior leaders in procurement and supply chains. We have a roundtable program and we also host a number of what I call coffee breaks, so informal networking calls between senior leaders. And I think there's a number of things that are coming out at the moment in terms of the challenges of leadership right now. I think obviously continuity of supply, so depending on where you're sourcing your goods from or your services from indeed, that lockdowns, closing of borders, ships being in ports, etc., have been the obvious challenges that people have faced. And it's not just that tier one supplier that people have been impacted by, but right down the supply chain, right down is something that people have found the impacts that have not anticipated. So that's the obvious one. I think also, in terms of the way that demand for end products has been disrupted, and that either demand has collapsed completely for business. So if we think, aviation, travel, restaurants, hospitality, the demand's collapsed there. So that's had an impact for supply chain and leaders in supply chain. But then on the other hand, absolute explosions of demand for things, particularly PPEs, obviously the example there, but some retail goods. Toilet rolls is something that we had a tremendous spike in demand for over here in the UK, and retail goods, particular types of retail goods, food, etc. have exploded. So, for some people it's been, not being able to get the goods out or not having any demand for their goods. And on the other hand, how do we keep up with demand at the other end? I think the other challenge that we're seeing on the business side is around cash and savings. So, not everybody's organisation or business that they worked for had a lot of cash in the balance sheet. And even if they did, there's been a lot of pressure on people to try and get more cash into the business. So whether that's about renegotiating payment terms with suppliers, about cancelling contracts, about negotiating different payment terms across the board, that's been something that we've seen, along with trying to eke out more savings from the contracts that people have had. I think the final challenge I wanted to talk about was about the whole sort of leadership part of team leadership part of the brief. And, with a lot of people now working from home, how you manage, how you lead that group of people going forward, how you just do the business, do the tasks that you need to do as a team, making sure people have got the right kit, the digital technology, and so on, the right processes around that. So a lot of people pivoting to digital signature, getting things like DocuSign through with no problem now, through to, just noticing whether people are not themselves, and that whole element of people's mental health and how they're coping with what is such a difficult and different period of time to be operating in and world to be operating in. So I think that side of the leadership brief, along with those straightforward but challenging supply chain specific elements of the leadership brief, are things that I think we've seen as being challenges for leaders going forward at the moment.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move to another questions. Why is the field of supply chain management lagging behind in choosing women as leaders? Can you also please explain a bit?
Okay, I mean, I don't think it's in particular lagging behind everyone else, because I think there are challenges across the board in terms of women coming through. So I think that, it's the same types of issues that we're perhaps seeing everywhere else. Things like we all tend to recruit people into our teams that are like us. So, if you've got a leadership team, or if you've got a supply chain team that's predominantly men, then, it's more likely perhaps that they'll recruit somebody that's like them to be in the team. I think that there are certain professions and disciplines where, women are seen to be more appropriate, and that, some of the skills that you would perceive as being good quality skills in a male candidate for supply chain role might be seen as women being, more too aggressive or too assertive. So I think there's the same issues around that there are in other things. I also think that the connection to ops and to the business, where again, generally speaking, that's seen as the bit that perhaps men traditionally do, and a lot of supply chain leaders perhaps coming out of that side of the business does mean that, again, back to the recruiting people like us, the pipeline being people like us, is true. And I think also, when you think back to education, to young people coming through those routes, and again, the careers advice or the suggested career paths that young people are given, that okay, well, if we're lucky, if supply chain and procurement are on the agenda in the first place, and if they are, potentially they're still seen as perhaps roles that men would do, and women would be more HR or that side of the brief. So I think there's a lot of challenges in supply chain management that are the same across as there are anywhere else. And to be honest, unless we have a step change in what we're doing, we're the numbers of women coming through and the sort of angle of the curve in terms of getting towards a more diverse group of people isn't going to change, because eking out a couple of % every year means that the tactics and the strategies that leaders are trying to create more diverse leadership teams aren't working, and perhaps we need actually a complete change in what people are doing. But again, that's not specific to supply chain management, but more of the same is not going to give us different results. As the saying goes, we perhaps need to try something completely different to get all women through.
Yeah. And what are the impacts of women leadership in a variety of supply chain roles, Helen?
Okay, well, I think, we all start from the position that, there are differences between men and women in terms of the way that their brains work. And that means that there's differences in the way that women approach problems compared to men, or issues compared to men. And that doesn't mean that they're better, but it does mean that they're different. And so, I picked a couple of examples that I wanted to use in terms of the impact that women have, because I think they're just different lenses that women and women's perceptions of problems bring to issues. So one that's quite recent is the new VP of Procurement, Leanne Russell at BP, and she's been quoted quite widely in the press and on social media as reflecting on letters that BP have sent to suppliers as being disrespectful, and that's during this COVID period. So that perhaps plays to the lens that women and women's approaches to issues has in terms of collaboration, of partnership, of communication, and that might that actually seeing the relationship with suppliers as being more collaborative is something that can be an impact that women's leadership in a role can bring. I think the other example I wanted to use was a CPO that I've been connected with for a number of years, who's Dapo Adji, who's the VP Manufacturing and Tech Ops at Janssen now. So she's come from an ops background, and her focus is very much on business partnerships. So again, you've obviously got commercial and that side of things that's a part of a supply chain role, but there's also in her approach that lens on partnership, and again that collaboration piece, that connection piece, which I think are a couple of impacts that women's leadership have brought to roles. I think more generally speaking, and again, it's not to say that this is only women, but women often have the main responsibility for the children. So I think that often that they bring to roles a perspective around balance, around having to make choices. And, back to COVID, one of the interesting things that's come out of the big move to work from home is that both mums and dads have had to deal with the challenges of the children, and not being able to put work first because the kids are there, and definitely young children don't always sit quietly when you need them to, when you've got a big meeting. So I think that that's other impacts that women leadership can bring to a role. Not because I think that women have to take time off when they have children. That does mean that the work-life balance and the importance of that side of things can be brought into a leadership role, and it can be shown that that's not a detriment to what that person can bring. That actually that's just part of that, part of being people with lives and with other priorities as well as work.
All right. So this is would be our last question today. In your personal opinion, what is the future of women's leadership in supply chain?
Well, I think it's good. I mean, I think that, as I've said, there's a number of really inspirational and able women coming through supply chain in all sectors. So it's not, in retail, in construction, in defence, in manufacturing. So across the board, we're seeing women leaders coming through. And we had a saying on Procurious a few years ago: you can't be what you can't see. So the more women coming through see women leaders there, that's gives them role models and people to aspire to be. I wanted to pick out a few women that I think are quite inspirational going forward to sort of highlight the future of women's leadership in supply chain management. The first one is Professor Amira Khan. So she's doing some fantastic thinking and research on supply chain risk.
Right.
And Amira's pushing through and being thought leadership in an academic world that's particularly dominated by men. Also in academia, we've got Alexis Bateman, who is at MIT in the Sustainable Supply Chains section. And again, she's doing some fantastic thinking and leadership work on sustainability in supply chains. So,
right.
That gives us some food for thought there. And the final person I wanted to call out, or woman I wanted to call out, is a young woman, and she's called Alyssa Strickland. And she's doing videos on TikTok explaining supply chains. So, when we think about the future of women's leadership, it's not only those fantastic women doing great thinking in academia, it's also someone like Alyssa who's on TikTok talking enthusiastically about supply chain, communicating with young people on that medium. And that gives me real hope for the future in terms of their leadership. So that's my positive vibe for you there on the future. It's looking good.
Awesome. Okay, so before we close today's conversation, Ellen, do you have any key takeaways or final talk?
I think my key takeaways really are that is this thing about connection and collaboration. It really is key going forward, and that women and men, we need to collaborate. We need to get out of our echo chambers and seek out new voices, because it's diversity that I think is the key. It's not men or women. It's,
right.
It's men and women and men that are going to make good and great leaders. And of course, I'd like to leave you with this quote from Mother Teresa, which is, it says, "You can do what I cannot do. I can do what you cannot do. together we can do great things, and I'd encourage everybody to join Procurious. That's where we get together and we do great things. So that's my takeaways for you today.
All right. Cool. So thanks so much for today's talk, Helen, and I look forward to speaking with you at another time. See you and goodbye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
At Bichara Supply Chain, we are committed to driving global perspective to embrace technological adaptation in improving process efficiencies. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Bichara Supply Chain. And stay tuned for the latest updates. To learn more, visit our website www.bicharasupplychain.com. Thank you for listening to us. We look forward to seeing you at our next episode.